the Palm Sunday. What does this holiday tell us about Christianity?
Palm Sunday is a really ancient church holiday, and what they are celebrating is marking the week before Easter when Jesus, they are told in the Gospels, rides on a donkey, or if you're reading Matthew, on donkeys, into Jerusalem, what's called a triumphal entry. You'll find it in Mark 11, Matthew 21, Luke 19, John 12. It's in all the Gospels. What is striking is that the Gospels point to a passage in the book of Zechariah, and they are conveying that Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a donkey or on two donkeys in Matthew 21 is a fulfillment of a prophecy that was written roughly 500 years earlier. The book of Zechariah. Zechariah was a prophet who lived at the very beginning of the Second Temple period. There were two other notable prophets at that time, Haggai and Malachi. Those are the only three prophets who lived in the early part of the Second Temple during the Persian Empire. What is very notable about these passages is not the contradiction between Matthew and Luke. It's not real. I don't want you to think about that Matthew misreads Zechariah 9:9, where the passage says that your king is coming and he is just, he's victorious, he's humble, he's riding a donkey, the colt, the foal of a donkey. And Matthew misreads that as two animals and writes a story that way. It's very tempting to be drawn to comparing that to Luke 19:29 through 35. That's what's very tempting. And it's striking because it tells you how the stories were formed. Matthew is reading Zechariah 9:9, and he just misreads it and then forges his story to adapt to what he thinks the text reads. It becomes transparent in how stories in the New Testament are written. They want Jesus to have done something, and then the story is formed to make him do it. I want to ignore that and really focus on what is very significant. As it turns out, Christians don't read the Jewish scriptures very much. Here, the consequences for not reading Tanakh, meaning reading Zechariah 9:9 in context, is fatal. Because if someone read Zechariah 9:9 in context, you see exactly what's going on here, and this is the story of the Christian religion. So Zechariah 9 is messianic, and when it says, "Be very happy, O daughter of Zion, shout, O daughters of Jerusalem, your king is coming," that is about the Mashiach. He's coming on a donkey. Why does that matter, what he's coming on? What is the significance of the animal that he's riding in on? Well, as it turns out, a donkey is an animal of labor, an animal of peace. Horses are animals of war. So what is being conveyed is that the Messiah is coming and he's ushering in peace to the world. And that's why a donkey rather than a horse. In case you doubt what I've just said, if you think that this is my homily, it's not. Because it says that in the very next passage, and the very next passage begins with the word v'hechreti, and there's a conjunction, meaning it's continuing. The separation of the verse between Zechariah 9:9 and 9:10 to 9:10 is completely artificial. If you're a Christian, you wouldn't know that. Because if you're a Christian, you don't know what it says in Zechariah 9:10 unless you look it up. Those are harsh words. They're true. And let's stick with the facts. Christians are not familiar with Zechariah 9:10. It's not quoted in the Christian Bible for very good reason. It's not preached in churches for very good reason. Because Zechariah 9:10 tells us that God is going to cut off, in the sense, remove the chariots from Ephraim and the horses from Jerusalem. There's the contrast between the donkey in verse 9 and the horses in verse 10. I mean, Jerusalem will have peace. The bow of war is going to be utterly removed. This he is referring to Mashiach. He will speak peace to the nations. That is exactly parallel to what we find in Isaiah 2, in Micah 4. The role of Mashiach is to give chichiach, which means to rebuke the nations, so that people will turn back to the God of Israel. There is nothing about the Mashiach performing miracles anywhere in Tanakh, ever. Not once. Dying for it, nothing like that. Eating his body, nothing like that. Drinking his blood, nothing like that. In every passage where the Mashiach is cited, and it should be stated that all Christians agree that these passages are referring to the Messiah. This is not disputed. Christians might quote passages that we don't think is talking about the Mashiach, but this everybody does. It's very transparent. If you want to, like, what is the Messiah going to be like? He is going to be a spiritual and political leader of the Jewish people, and the whole world will listen to him. And the result is that there'll be world peace. The implements of war will be transformed into implements of agriculture. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, neither will they learn of war anymore. Out of Zion will go forth the Torah, and the word of Hashem from Jerusalem. He'll speak peace to the nations. Doesn't say, and he'll come out of a grave. He'll resurrect from the dead. He'll make the blind see. That's an interpolation from Luke 4 that he interpolates into Isaiah 61. It isn't really there. Who will listen to him? Today, you can have a leader in one country say something, other leaders say, I don't have to listen. People don't have to follow the leaders of other countries, of other nations. But in contrast, the Mashiach is going to be someone that the world will listen to. And his rule will be from sea to the west, from the river to the ends of the earth. So what the church has to do, now, this is not your pastor. Your pastor, I don't know him, is probably a nice guy. This is the way he's been taught, and that's the way his pastor's been taught. They're all taught Zechariah 9:9 because you can have Jesus do that. You can have Jesus coming into Jerusalem in a triumphal entry, and people are waving palm branches because they think it's Sukkot, Festival of Tabernacles. I don't know. So they got the, all right, whatever, okay. So you've got that. But you could say that somebody rode into a donkey into Jerusalem roughly 2,000 years ago, because as it turns out, it's very likely millions of people have done that. And it's unverifiable. But if Jesus would have brought about the removal of the bow of war from Jerusalem, the horses of war from Jerusalem, if he would have spoken to the nations of the world about peace, and they would have not raised up a sword against another nation, we would know it today. If the world peace would have been brought about as the result of the instructions of Jesus, we would know about it today. As it turns out, the Christian religion has produced more bloodshed, more religious war than any other religion in the world. The bloodiest religious war in human history was fought between Protestants and Catholics. It was a war that lasted for 30 years, thus called the 30-Year War. Germany was wiped out, decimated, the Holy Roman Empire decimated. Well, what emerged from the church, you don't have to go to the 17th century, you can walk that back, is a religion that would produce so much bloodshed, so much hatred, so much intolerance. And if those people were not real Christians, then there were no real Christians. They were the most devout Christians. So what is germane for us is to examine the four Gospels. They don't agree on many, many things. What is striking is that 9 verse 10 is absent not only from the books of the church, but from the minds of the church. It has been stripped from the thinking of the Christian. The consequences is staggering. What must happen as a result of the coming of Mashiach is a transformation of people. And what specifically? Peace will enter the world. The nations will speak in a pure speech. Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 9. There's nothing Christian about those passages. The reason why Jews who are knowledgeable and read Christian holy books are repelled by them is not what people think. It's not because we think, oh, virgin birth, how stupid. That's a small-time miracle. That would be, in the scheme of things, that would be a very insignificant miracle. What is striking to a person who is immersed in Tanakh to observe in the Christian canonical literature is how different the signature is, how different the message is, how the Jewish scriptures have been just ripped to pieces. What the church did was just remove anything from their Bible that would point to one thing, and that is Jesus couldn't possibly be the Messiah. And that's what is happening today. Christians around the world are focusing on Zechariah 9:9, and not 9:10, and not because they're bad people, because they have the worst possible shepherds. But there will be a true prince that will come. There will be a true shepherd who is with us, who will bring the Mashiach, the son of David, and please God, we will see that redemption quickly in our time.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא